In the missing market simulation, student ministers find that their ability to distribute goods and services to satisfy consumer wants and needs is severely hampered by their inability to access the information that markets provide. So as not to give away the lesson that you ultimately want students to discover in this activity, don't introduce the activity by its name, Missing Markets. Instead, introduce it by its subtitle, The Task of the Planning Ministry. For this activity, you'll need 2 copies of the minister's instructions handout, and you'll also need 50 to 75 unsharpened number 2 pencils and 100 assorted Halloween-sized candy bars. And of course, you'll need prizes for successful store managers.
We're going to start with an activity today that you're going to be consumers. I'm going to ask a couple of you to be some planning ministers and a couple of you to be shopkeepers. And so, Julianne, would you mind being a shopkeeper today?
To begin, appoint 2 planning ministers and 2 shopkeepers and 1 observer. The planning ministers are tasked with deciding how to use the available resources to produce 2 consumer goods, pencils and candy. Give them their minister's instruction handout and send them outside of the classroom to make their production and pricing decisions.
You can choose to produce all pencils, that would be what would be in the stores, all pencils, or all candy, or some combination in between. And you can see this chart shows you different combinations of candy and pencils, and your job is to decide how much. Remember, you want to keep the people happy, and you don't want there to be any wasted resources, okay? So I'm going to let you take this outside. Notice that if you choose to produce 20 pencils, you can have no candy. But if you choose to produce, let's say, 14 pencils, you could have 12 pieces of candy. Or if you spent all of your production on candy, you would get 40 pieces of candy and no pencils. So these are all the possible combinations that you have to choose from, okay? So Conrad.
Notice here that I gave the students a laminated copy of the possible combinations of candy and pencils that they can produce, given their limited resources. Laminate several different versions for different possible class sizes to be used over and over each year. The instructions in the lesson plan are written for a class size of 25 to 28 students, but you'll need to increase or decrease the amounts for larger or smaller classes. Just be sure to keep the ratio of 1 pencil to 2 pieces of candy and make sure that the maximum amount of either that they can produce is not enough to satisfy consumer wants easily. On their way out, remind the ministers that their goals are to use all the available resources and keep consumers as happy as possible. Also let them know that their classmates are the consumers and they will each have 20 rubles to spend. Lastly, choose a student to be the observer.
An observer in the room. We'll ask Kathy to be our observer because later we're going to want to know about the decision-making process that you guys had and what went on.
This person will step outside of the room with the planning ministers and listen to the decision-making process. They are not to talk or to plan with the ministers, but later they will be called on to share their observations as to how the ministers made their choices and what ultimately they decided.
Pencils or candy be more expensive?
Well, the pencils because if you
Okay, let's do 8 and 24.
Okay, why?
How many children are there?
There's 23 of us.
There's 23 of us? Let's do 6 and 28.
19 actually. Why don't we just do all candy?
Not all candy.
You want some pencils?
Someone has to want a pencil.
Right then, why don't we do 5 and 30?
While the ministers are deliberating in the hall,
we have our shopkeepers, who will be rewarded, of course, with an incentive.
Set your 2 shopkeepers up at the candy store and the pencil store. Explain that there is an important test coming up and that they must take it with a special number 2 unsharpened pencil from the pencil store, or they risk not getting into college. The purpose of this instruction is to create a high demand for pencils.
If you don't have one of these pencils, you're not going to be able to take the assessment. You're not going to be able to go to college. Your life is basically going to be ruined if you don't have one of these pencils, okay? So it's very important that you have one of these pencils. Any questions?
Call the planning ministers back in and have them report to you their production amounts as well as the prices they've chosen.
All right, so the prices are, the price of pencils is 5 rubles, okay, and the price of candy is 3 rubles.
But do not tell the class how many of each were produced. Go to the stores and distribute the appropriate amounts to each store.
So 5 rubles for pencils And how many for candy? 3.
Open the stores for a short selling round where consumers can purchase the items for the prices posted.
Stores are open.
Remind shopkeepers to mark off their appropriate numbers of rubles on their debit cards. Let the planning ministers observe from the doorway, but they may not interact with the consumers. Watch carefully and stop the round just before students start to buy something that wasn't their first choice, simply because their choice was gone.
Okay. Looks like the market's closed. Market's closed. Go ahead and have a seat.
Point out to the planning ministers that there were not enough pencils and there was way too much candy, a lot of wasted resources, and too many unhappy consumers.
Production ministers, do you see this problem?
Look at this.
We have wasted resources here. Candy, just sitting here, wasted resources. Not enough pencils to go around. Did you guys not understand? We don't want wasted resources, and we want to keep the people happy. Are you guys happy? No. Do these people sound happy? Okay, go out there and let's try this again, okay? Remember?
Send them back to the drawing board to plan production for the next round. But this time, all they have to worry about is the quantity because their superiors have decided to hold prices constant to promote stability in the economy.
Just worry about the amounts, the quantities in each store, okay?
While the planning ministers are out of the room, tell the students in class that they all passed the exam and it's time to throw a party.
And you know what you need at a party, right? Candy, okay? Candy. You need candy at your party, okay?
Okay, we're ready. The trucks are delivering.
The trucks are delivering, and let's find out how much do we get?
As you repeat the process this round, once again it will be obvious that the production ministers didn't get it right. This time there are too many pencils and not enough candy, wasted resources, and unhappy consumers.
Okay. What happened? Here Julianne has pencils left, and Adam is out of candy.
That's these two.
What happened, you guys?
The demand for candy.
You guys don't produce enough.
You're the ones that decide how much are produced. So what did you change from the last time?
We added more pencils.
You added more pencils, which means there had to be less candy.
Less candy, yes.
But did there seem to be a greater demand, Adam, for candy this time?
Yes, because we wanted to throw a party.
They wanted a party. You didn't know that?
They said they wanted more pencils. We made more pencils.
They said
With the help of the observer, debrief the activity by asking how production decisions were made, how they changed over time, how satisfied the consumers were. Focus on the problems that were created by having central planners manage the production, allocation, and pricing of pencils and candy. Finally, have the students compare their own experiences with shopping in the markets with the experiences of this activity. The major lesson you want to drive home with this simulation is that markets provide important information about price and consumer demand. When markets are missing, that information is not available to planners who make allocation decisions in centrally directed economies, and the result is a misallocation of resources, shortages, surpluses, and wasted resources.